The Israeli cabinet, ladies and gentlemen, they're scared. They're moving from one place to another. So we had this report coming in the Times of Israel alongside a couple of other media outlets saying that cabinet meeting moved to secure underground location in wake of drone attack on Prime Minister's home. They're no longer safe. They feel the threat and they are scared after the recent attacks and attempted assassination on Benjamin Netanyahu with a drone coming from Hezbollah that targeted his window. That later turned out to be bulletproof. So he's clearly preparing to be attacked, but now they're taking it to the next level, ladies and gentlemen. They're hiding in bunkers, including their government and their cabinet. The cabinet met Monday in an underground secure location in Jerusalem's governmental complex and not at the Prime Minister's office due to security concerns at the recommendation of the Shin Bet. Now, before we continue, the Shin Bet already advised Netanyahu previously, and they tightened the security measures on Benjamin Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, in more particular detail, his internal security team and the person in charge, the head of his security, he told everyone in Netanyahu's security team that Benjamin Netanyahu can no longer move without my approval. And that was months back after they started feeling the actual intensity and level of threat coming on Benjamin Netanyahu's life. And why is that happening? That's happening not only because of increased sophistication when it comes to the people opposing Netanyahu and targeting him, Iran or the resistance, but in more detail, we had Hezbollah targeting him directly, but it's because we have much more networks working for Iran inside of Israel. Israel, in recent weeks, uncovered 7 networks of people, Israelis, working for Iran. What does that tell you? That tells you that many more people in Israel have more faith in Iran than they do in their leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu continued this genocide, taking Israelis with him, taking Israeli lives, taking away the lives of the Israeli prisoners of war in Gaza, and increasing the risk overall on the average person inside of Israel to a level where they thought, hold on a second, Iran might be safer for us. So let's help them take down Benjamin Netanyahu. The decision was made due to an increase in threats against senior Israeli officials and in light of last week's Hezbollah drone attack on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home. Government sources told news outlets that the move would not be a one-time event and that cabinet meetings are expected to be held in changing locations for the near future due to the same security concerns. Ministers were notified of the decision only in the morning. They're not even telling the ministers. Why? Because they fear that some of them might leak the information that would later reach the people who want to harm Benjamin Netanyahu inside of Israel, leading them to pass that info to the people who actually want to kill him, and they might have a successful operation at some point. And we saw yesterday, I shared a part of video of the family members of Israelis who lost their lives, shouting at Netanyahu and criticizing him, again representing the will of many people opposing Benjamin Netanyahu and who also want this to end. 3 drones were launched from Lebanon in the attack on Netanyahu's private residence in Caesarea earlier this month. 2 were intercepted over Rosh Hanikra and Nahariya, respectively, and the 3rd exploded on the home in the central seaside town, known for its high-end villas and Roman ruins. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu lives there. As a matter of fact, he, in the middle of this war, existential war, he was focusing on renovating. He upgraded his pool in his house. Do you know that? So his son is bathing in Miami while he's sending people to die, and he's worried about having a nicer pool during this existential war that he's calling the war of revival now. Days after the attack, the IDF cleared for publication the fact that the blast cracked glass in a bedroom window but did not penetrate the home, apparently because of reinforced glass and other protections. Afterward, the Prime Minister's office requested 2 million new Israeli shekels to boost security. Senior Israeli officials have increasingly become targets of Iran and its proxies, and security forces have recently made numerous arrests of individuals in Israel hired by Iran to commit acts of espionage and terror, including assassinations. Iran on Monday stepped up threats against Israel following the IDF's weekend strike on the Islamic Republic in response for Tehran's October 1st ballistic missile barrage at Israel. The head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Hussein Salami, said the Israeli strike's bitter consequences will be unimaginable, according to the Tasnim news agency. We wonder what this unimaginable will look like. If it's going to be anything similar to October 1st, then Benjamin Netanyahu and his cult are in trouble. That's the first thing that I want to talk to you about. They act like, we're safe and we're protected. No. Now, top figures in Israel are no longer protected, mainly because of their government's actions and the person leading that country. And all of them feel like they are losing their safety, losing their livelihoods, just for the sake of one man's political path and selfish, greedy desires. And they're turning to Iran. They're helping Iran to take down Benjamin Netanyahu. So Benjamin Netanyahu has many problems, not just outside of Israel. The majority of his problems are inside of Israel. But it's very typical. Israel usually likes to export, internal problems on the eternal outside enemy instead of having any sort of self-reflection. Moving on to the next topic, Hezbollah. What's happening with Lebanon? Why is Israel not having, progress when it comes to Lebanon? Is it that difficult? Well, firstly, before I tell you exactly what's happening in Lebanon, Israel always says that every, journalist in Gaza is a terrorist, right? All of them, they support terror. They are Hamas operatives. And of course, all of the evidence is contrary to that. To them, the bees in Gaza are Hamas, the ants are Hamas, the stone, everything is Hamas. Hell, Israelis are Hamas now. The Israeli people opposing Netanyahu, they call them Hamas, don't they? But without providing any evidence. But now what do we have? We have evidence that they are the ones who are committing terror. They're journalists, the journalists of the genocide state, physically, and they proudly publish this, going and pressing a button with the genocide forces in South Lebanon to explode a civilian house, and they have the audacity to tell you that it's the Palestinians doing that. Typical, blame your enemies with everything that you do, deny everything, deflect, and of course, lie and lie and lie until people believe it. But thankfully, at least they publish the things that they say that their enemies do, and they do it proudly as well. They're doing it proud. It's not like they're hiding. Which leads us to the next topic. Lebanon. Okay, we're in Lebanon. I mean, it's the same topic, really. But we are in Lebanon, and this man is, proudly taking down civilian buildings, right? But why are they, flexing their muscles on the civilians? Always ask yourself, when they flex muscles on civilians, ask what's happening when it comes to the resistance and what are they doing to them? And that's what they're doing to them. Here we have like a summary field summary issued by the Islamic Resistance Operations in Lebanon from Hezbollah. And in that summary, as you can see, it's a very long summary, right? But we'll highlight a couple of things from this summary. Ground confrontations. One, two, three, four, 5 axes of confrontation, fighting Israeli genocide forces in all of these locations. Yesterday, we had a report that 3 fighters took down 20 of the genocide forces inside of Lebanese territories, taking down Merkavas, targeting the forces inside Lebanese territories, targeting, well, very minimal, invasion inside of Lebanon, and targeting them inside of Israel. Then we had their missile operations. And when it comes to the missiles, this is very interesting. Today, Haifa was targeted with 5 missiles, and everyone reported that the intensity was like different. And we had an elaboration. So according to Israel, they took down 2 of them with the Iron Dome and 3 landed. But the sound, the effects of the missiles were different this time. And now we had an elaboration from Hezbollah that said the missile force of the Islamic resistance continues to target enemy gatherings and military sites and barracks along the Lebanese-Palestinian border, reaching military, strategic, and security bases deep inside occupied Palestine with various types of missiles, including precision missiles that are being used for the first time. But so far, they did not declare what type of missiles they are. But the only thing that they said is they're precision missiles that are being used for the first time. The number of launches carried out by the missile force of the past 4 days reached 103 operations. And when we say 103 operations, each of these operations could include 3, 4, 5, 10, or 20 missiles, because the average number of missiles landing on Israel every day is approximately 200. And they continued with regards to their air force, gradually increasing day after day to target the enemy's military base from the Lebanese-Palestinian border all the way to the depth of occupied Palestine. The total number of operations since the 17th of September until now has reached 65 launches of more than 150 drones of various types and sizes, 30 of which were during the past 4 days, with the depth of up to 145 kilometers, even to the southern suburbs of Tel Aviv. And the last thing they mentioned is their air defense unit taking down or targeting a Hermes 900 at one point that was taken down a couple of days ago, alongside other activities. So you're talking about a very intense front. Again, Israel tries to flex muscles when it comes to the civilians, when it comes to Lebanon. And even the Gazan population now, they say, whenever they hear more attacks coming from Israel, they'll say, oh, we wonder what, the Palestinian armed forces did so that they can come and punish the civilians because they're failing, which leads us to Gaza. The 460th Genocide Brigade, leaves Gaza with 2 remaining brigades left, and that's in Jabalia, that's in North Gaza. And before I go into the article here, Israel is, of course, having an implementation of what they call the General's Plan in North Gaza. The General's Plan is a reference to, the genocide generals who are saying that we need to completely ethnically cleanse North Gaza up to the Netzarim line, which is just over central Gaza, that splits it in half, where Israel wants to permanently establish itself and expel the population from the north, starting from the most northern parts, going down and slowly following the people as they are forced out of their homes. Some people in Gaza have been displaced more than 12 times now. People were running away in the last minute without knowing where they would go. And we spoke about in previous days the levels of atrocities that they're committing, especially with the targeting of like hospitals, right? Not that targeting houses is like acceptable or anything else in terms of civilian infrastructure, but hospitals. I mean, people in ICU, killing the hospital manager's son just because he was taking a humanitarian position and he pledged not to leave the patients to die on their own, punishing the innocent civilians. Okay. However, despite all of that, they are facing many problems. What are they facing? Well, firstly, when it comes to Jabalia, the Jabalia refugee camp, and again, a reminder here, Gaza, before the 7th of October, it's formed out of 72% refugees. Refugees from where? From occupied Palestinian territories, the areas that are called now Israel. And again, these are the people who conducted the attacks on Israel because they were living in a concentration camp. They were living in a concentration camp, in particular, or more intensely after the democratic elections in 2006, when Hamas won, and a complete siege. So no employment, homes hazardous to live in, no prospect, no nothing. People don't know where their next meal is coming from. And of course, now they're intensifying the genocide and ethnic cleansing campaign. But with all of the attacks on the civilian population, they haven't been able to reach the central part of the Jabalia camp, despite all of the barbarism. And many of the people were there up until the last second. Although we've had a confirmation that just over 50,000 were displaced in the last several weeks. And Israel kidnapped 600 as well. That's alongside 1,000 being martyred. Devastating stories. They couldn't reach the central camp. Why couldn't they reach the central camp? It's because they're met with fierce resistance. They're met with fierce resistance, and every single day, and the fact that they are still able to publish it, the resistance is beyond comprehension, really. It's a besieged area. How are they doing this recording? Where are they releasing it? And how are they still able to function? So today only they targeted a troop carrier and 2 D9s in East Jabalia and 1 Merkava 4 in North Jabalia. A troop carrier, you're talking about 18 people. D9's 1-1, Merkava at least 4, because it can carry 4 more. So total like 25 people. But again, Israel does not talk about the numbers too much. Yet now we have a confirmation that they are withdrawing. The occupation withdraws the 460th Brigade from northern Gaza and announces the displacement of 50,000 Palestinians. Leaving, and of course they're saying here, listen to this, the Israeli Occupation Army announced the end of the military operation against Kamal Udwan Hospital. A military operation against Kamal Udwan Hospital. What kind of entity are we talking about? A military operation against a hospital, a besieged hospital barely functioning, right? That declared it was out of service a week before because they were choking them. And they are proud of the operation against the hospital. Leaving the Gov'T and 401st Brigade, according to Israeli sources. The army claimed that since the beginning of the operations in the area, about 50,000 residents have been evacuated, forcibly removed through terror, like they established their state. And about 600 people have been arrested, kidnapped, who it said belong to the Hamas movement. Of course, they're going to say it belongs to the Hamas movement. It said that the remaining resistance elements were stationed in Jabalia and that its forces are working to escalate the fighting in the refugee camp, adding that the Israeli army decided to besiege the camp to exhaust the population, isolate who they label as these, and prevent them from escaping. That's according to the Ma'arif newspaper. Added that the 460th Gov'T and 401st Brigades besieged the Jabali camp. The 1st Brigade reached the schools and shelters. Again, this is the accomplishment. Schools and shelters and hospitals. From there, 5,000 residents were evacuated. Then 20,000. Then finally, the number reached 50,000 residents leaving. The Israeli occupation committed new massacres in Gaza Strip during the past few hours, resulting to about 100 martyrs and dozens more wounded and missing. The Palestinian Health Ministry said, and we have this number officially by the Health Ministry in Gaza, 43,020 martyrs and 101,110 injuries since October the 7th. Of course, Israel will not really declare the true reasons behind the withdrawal of this brigade. Firstly, if your operation hasn't finished yet, why are you withdrawing the brigade? You haven't had any success against the resistance. You're looking to besiege them. How comes you're withdrawing if you are failing? You need to have more, right? You need reinforcement. You need to. It's because they're failing. They are suffering tremendous losses every single day. They're losing more and more tanks and bulldozers and more genocide force vehicles and soldier gatherings. And they are lacking motivation. Don't forget, like the people being sent there from the genocide forces, they thought that they would get this over and done with many, many months ago. So people going in and out and in and out and in and out of a certain location. Imagine how demotivating that is to know that you are doing all of this and you're failing. Therefore, there's more lack of motivation. They're suffering tremendous losses in Gaza like they are in Lebanon. They're covering up the numbers. So the fact that they are withdrawing the 460th Brigade indicates that they are suffering tremendous losses and that they are only repeating what they have done before when it comes to the withdrawal, because they haven't succeeded in any area they entered inside of Gaza, and there are still hubs that they were not able to penetrate nor establish themselves fully in. And Jabalia is another example. And Jabalia is one of those refugee camps that is very well known to its fierce resistance when it comes to Israel from the days of the first Intifada or the first uprising in 1987. Now, we have the ceasefire talks, and this is the final thing that I wanted to share with you. Egypt proposed 48-hour ceasefire, during which both sides will swap some prisoners, and afterwards we will have a quiet period of 10 days during which we will have the actual negotiations for a long-term and full ceasefire starting, and just get this over and done with. However, we had the response. We had the response from Benjamin Netanyahu. No, I don't agree. Benjamin Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire, to a level where more and more people are getting sick of him. And now we have more people resigning. Top member of Israeli hostage negotiating team quits. This was reported in the Times of Israel. And this man has been there since the beginning trying to reach a deal, but he now resigned. A top member of Israel's negotiating team for the release of the hostages held by Hamas announced his sudden resignation today. The news of Brigadier General Oren Setter's resignation was first reported by Israel's Khan public broadcaster and later confirmed by the IDF. Setter served as a Deputy Major General Nitzan Alon, the IDF's point man in the negotiations for a hostage ceasefire deal. Khan suggests that Setter quit the negotiation team due to the impasse in the talks. In response to the report, the IDF said that Setter worked tirelessly to advance the efforts to return the hostages since returning to the army from vacation ahead of his slated retirement last year. The officer will return to assist the hostage headquarters in the future as well as needed, the IDF adds. As needed, of course, they're trying to sugarcoat it slightly, but more and more people are getting sick of Benjamin Netanyahu, and the people who are there are simply enjoying the fact that they can still travel to Qatar back and forth or to Egypt, enjoy, 5-star hotels and dinners, talk and come back without any results. I mean, the only thing that these negotiations are doing in the way they are being conducted now is you're just buying Israel time. You're not doing anything else because there's nothing genuine. Benjamin Netanyahu had golden plates on the table, right, of offers that are very, very attractive, especially for Israel. Some of them included a deal with Saudi Arabia, included a defense agreement even with Saudi Arabia that he rejected. That was back in April. And then the negotiating delegation started to criticize him more and more. And they started saying, firstly, we're being prevented from doing our job. Secondly, we get a positive sign in the morning, then a negative sign in the evening. Every time we're about to reach a ceasefire, Benjamin Netanyahu comes out with more impossible conditions and puts sticks in the wheels. And many of them gave him an ultimatum. Previous head of the current head of Mossad, who is participating, he told him, the Israelis held in Gaza, they don't have a lot of time. Gallant told him they don't have weeks to wait. He refused a ceasefire that was accepted by Hamas. He rejected a proposal that came from Joe Biden, and they refused to comply with anything that comes from the UN Security Council. What does all of that tell you? That they are on a mission. They are on a mission. They have a vision of the greater Israel. But the problem is they don't really have a genuinely convincing military strategy. Because if they did, then, they're harming themselves with what they are doing. And not only from a military perspective, but from a political perspective as well, from an economic perspective to an exceptionally high level. Yet Benjamin Netanyahu is still insisting on continuing, despite the fact that he had offers on the table for a ceasefire, and despite the fact that he had pressure internally. He tried to run away forward by having an escalation when it comes to targeting the Hamas leader and then the senior figures of Hezbollah, then the actual massive escalation with Lebanon. And every time we have a slight de-escalation, we'll see Benjamin Netanyahu coming up with something else. But that could be linked to something also beyond Benjamin Netanyahu himself, although it doesn't necessarily have to be, because Benjamin Netanyahu himself, he is not interested in a ceasefire. He is a completely delusional, arrogant, psychopathic leader, but he is also tied with people in the United States, and we're having more reports coming from Israeli officials who do not declare, of course, who they are, anonymous, that there will be no deal whatsoever before we have actual results following the US elections. If that is the case, then that indicates that Benjamin Netanyahu definitely did have a certain deal with Donald Trump, assuming that he will win the US elections, that he will not hand the Democrats in the United States any sort of deal whilst they are in power, and he will only make it easier to reach a ceasefire after Donald Trump arrives. Why? Because Donald Trump, firstly, he improved his relations with Benjamin Netanyahu. We saw him and his wife. They had a very tough period after Joe Biden won the elections in 2020. Trump was very upset that Netanyahu recognized these elections. But since then, they've improved their elections. And Donald Trump always tries to portray himself as the person who finds solutions. He constantly promises that I will end the war in Ukraine, I'll end the war in Russia. And he's now saying, I'm going to end this chaos in the Middle East. So many people view this as an indication that Netanyahu might indeed hand this ceasefire situation to Donald Trump, again, assuming Donald Trump would become the US president following the elections.